Afternoon on a very, very warm mid-June afternoon. Those of you that watched my video on my experimental solar hot water panel, I introduced this calorifier that's going into the crafter. Well, we're now getting on with doing the plumbing, soon be pressure testing it. I recently bought a 12 volt stroke 230 volt dual immersion heater. Eventually I will be connecting the heat exchanger in this calorifier to the engine, but that's not going to be for a while yet, and maybe it won't even be necessary, I don't know. The 12 volt immersion fitted in this is 300 watts, so 25 amps. It will take a long time to heat this calorifier up. It's a 30 litre calorifier, but when driving it's effectively free energy that I can use to pump into this. The other element is a 700 watt immersion. The original immersion heater that I took out of this van was a kilowatt. That one there. And you'll notice that in order to fit these things, you've got to take the cable out in order to get this dirty great box spanner, which I bought from Screwfix, cheaper than anywhere. You won't be able to get it onto the large nut with the cable in the way, so you have to take the cable off. Now when it comes to do this one, the top cable there is 12 volt DC, big thick wires, more than capable of carrying the current that this is going to use. Below that, in a standard clamp, is the mains cable. You can see the mains connections there. Neutral lie through the thermostat down to the other element, part of the element. When I dismantled this in order to do this dirty great nut up, the neutral wire had been nicked. Where they'd cut the insulation back, they'd actually cut into the wire. I didn't like that, so I thought I'd just quickly rewire the whole thing. I've got it I've got it strapped to the cold feed. Although this is heat-proof cable, I don't want to have it touching, especially the coil inputs and outputs, because they will be up to 80 or 90 degrees. So I've strapped it to the cold feed just to get it out of the way when I wire it up later on. And then there's a cap that goes over it. Originally, as I say, I had to dismantle it, the cabling. Originally it had a nice bit of heat shrink on. I haven't got anything big enough, but I put a bit of heat shrink on the bit that's exposed, and there's a nice, that's not a rough edge along there, so that will cover. Right, so this calorifier, it has on the side there a 4-bar pressure release valve. Although I will be fitting an expansion tank in the van, if the water expanded to the point, because hot water expands as heating, if the water expanded to a point where it got too hot, pressure relief valve goes, water goes down there, and out the bottom of the van. Also, this feed here, via that stop valve there, that is my drain for the cold water tank, which is in there. There's a 125 litre cold water tank in there. Just like in the Crafter, in the Sprinter rather, I've got the cold water tank inboard. Bit of insulation around it just to manage condensation. Don't want the risk of freezing, or try to eliminate the risk of freezing, and therefore I didn't want any water pipes, even drain pipes, below the van that hold water. So this part here and this part here, up to that tap there, will be empty of water, except when we want to drain it. So it's just an effort to minimise any freezing. Plus, once I've boxed this calorifier in, there will be some residual heat in there. All hot water tanks give off a bit of heat. I mean, this boss, this boss here is a fair old heat sink. I'm hoping that any residual heat in the box I build around this, I can duct out and keep the battery warm. That's why the battery, as I mentioned in the previous video, the battery's just sitting there at the moment. It's probably going to sit over here somewhere. There's not enough room unless I juggle something else around to put it above this calorifier. But if I can put a little vent in and draw some of the, just 4 or 5 degrees of temperature out of this to the battery, maybe that might save me having to mess about with heating pads. But there you go, that's the calorifier in. Pump above it. I've got room here for the relay. You have to use a relay with the 12 volt immersion heater, because these thermostats are only rated at 20 amps. So they're fine for switching the main side, because there's very little current running. It's only about 2 or 3 amps, I believe. 700 watts, so what's that? Just under 3 amps. But for the 12 volt side, you have to actually switch a relay, and they will all go up there. And then lastly, these black things. There. They're very useful. They're just formers. They give you an almost 90-degree bend on plastic piping. And I like these. They save using a 90-degree. Obviously you can't avoid using them. But they save using a 90-degree. They will set the pipe, and obviously over time the pipe sets in that position anyway. But they just hold it, and they take any of the they take away the strain that may be occurring either on the fitting while the pipe eventually cold sets in place, or on the actual plumbing fittings as well. So there you go, plumbing going in. And then I've got a small what's the word now, expansion vessel there. I've actually bought a large one. That one's only 2 litres, and for this much hot water, 30 litres, you really need a 5 litre expansion tank. So that one's going to be redundant. I've got my pipe work going, you can just see it to the right of the expansion tank, going into the wall, off to the shower over there. And then I've got my pipe work running into the sink. And again, more of those little bends. And then I've got some cubbies either side that I can use for storage. Cold feed in, and that's just the cable for the level gauge. And then ratchet straps just hold this in place. Although it's held within this box, I've strapped it down as well. So that's plumbing semi-laid out. Sink's semi-fitted as well, and tap. It's not all screwed down and glued down yet. I've just put it in so I can get the pipe work lined up. We're getting there. Gas connection, couple of bits and bobs, put the bed in, we'll have a usable van. Thanks for watching.